Let's look at the tradition of alchemy, the occult tradition known as alchemy. Again, this came out of the Egyptian tradition. So it's going to have a lot of similar teachings regarding morality. And ultimately, that's what, again, to reemphasize, it's what all these traditions were about, teaching morality to their adherents, teaching the difference between right and wrong, and teaching how natural law operates so we could transform from a being that is in ignorance of that knowledge to a being that is actually enlightened to that knowledge and then could practically put that knowledge into work in real life. So, I call this section Alchemy Out of Darkness and Into Light. Alchemy literally means from chem. Al is a prefix that means from or related to or out of. And then chem, of course, meant black in ancient Egyptian and was often the name used for Egypt. So it was from darkness, out of darkness. Alchemy is an occult tradition taught through allegories. An allegory, again, is a cryptic story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted or decoded in order to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral lesson. Again, as we were breaking down those statues in the Comitian tradition, allegorically, what lesson were they trying to communicate to people by building statues? And you'd have to know the background of the story of these gods to really be able to decode what the allegory is. Showing that statue to somebody who's never heard of Horus, Osiris, or Isis wouldn't really do much. But if you understand the verbal traditions and the written stories about those gods, then you understand what they represented and the allegory can be decoded. That's how occultism works. It works through relational and correlative thinking. So the alchemy is taught through allegory, through symbols and allegory, as many occult traditions are. In the tradition of alchemy, it is asserted that all base modes of human consciousness, which are called base metals in alchemy, again, in alchemy you're dealing with the transmutation of metals from one form into another form. But they're not really talking about metals. Okay? They're talking about qualities of human consciousness. That's what these metals are. They're modalities of consciousness. So it's taught that the base modalities of human consciousness, or base metals, are actually imperfections of pure consciousness, or what the alchemists symbolically called gold consciousness. And that all metals are ordained by nature to become the perfect, quote, gold of the sun, or in other words, enlightened consciousness or enlightened beings. The alchemist then seeks to remove from his or her thoughts, emotions, and actions their disorderly imperfections or base characteristics in order to bring them to their true state of natural order, in other words, harmony with natural law, and to transmute them into, quote, alchemical gold, which again represented the purification of mind, body, and spirit. Now notice this is again an apophatic tradition. It works through a negative pathway. You're starting with something and you are breaking it down and removing the impurities. You're not adding something to it, you're taking away something that is already there. And this is representative of, we are polluted with so much bad information, with bad programming, with beliefs that don't serve who we really are, with beliefs that don't give us an accurate understanding about how nature and the laws of consciousness work. So we need to get rid of those impurities, to take them away from ourselves, to break them down and to decalcify that which has become rigid and hardened. And it's like ossified like bone. And that's what the hardened ego is like. And it's to break that down and to carry it away, to dissolve it and remove those impurities. Some of the symbols in the symbolic tradition of allegory, very simple, basic, rudimentary ones. There's so many of them, you can get lost in them all. But there were elemental forces that the alchemists wanted to convey information about and basically define. And they had a symbol for them, and then they interpreted that allegorically. And here's some basic ones. The symbol of earth, an inverted equilateral triangle with a line going through about the 2/3 point if you take the measure from the base to the apex. The symbol of earth represented inherent characteristics of the being, their talents and resources that they may have developed or that they had a proclivity to or an inclination toward. Perhaps something that was inherent, that they maybe came in with a tendency for. So air represented the intellect, and that is the pure intellect, meaning the left brain modality, our ability to compute, our ability to define things logically, our ability to break things down, analyze, etc. Water, the inverted triangle, represented emotion, intuition, and creativity. Again, that sacred feminine essence, dealing with largely emotion and the sacred feminine qualities. And then fire, an upward pointing triangle. Again, we've seen that inverted triangle in water, representing the chalice, called the chalice in many older symbolic traditions. And the element of fire in alchemy was the upright pointing triangle, which represented the blade, or again, a rudimentary masculine phallic symbol representing action, willpower, and courage. Okay, the actual ability to create change within oneself and to go out and create change in the world. Then there was a fifth element. So you have earth, air, water, and fire, and then you had the quintessence, meaning the fifth essence. The fifth element was spirit, represented by a solar wheel with 8 spokes, a circle and then an eight-spoke cross in the middle of it. This represented the divine spark or the divine essence within all of us. You know, the essence of the source, or the creator, the underlying intelligence in nature, which is ultimately present in everything within nature, including us. Alchemists speak of something called prima materia, or starting matter. Starting substance is what prima materia was. Again, the starting substance is the human being that needs to be purified, that needs the impurities removed from them so that they can come to a more clear and accurate and de-occulted understanding of the laws of nature. The starting substance, or prima materia, is used at the inception of the alchemical work, the beginning. Silver is considered to be one of the starting substances. There are others, but silver is one of the main sources of prima materia in alchemy. The alchemical symbol for silver is the moon, or is associated with the moon. Because silver represented, in alchemy, the feminine aspects of the human psyche, including the attributes of intuition, inner wisdom, compassion, open-mindedness, and contemplation. And that's what you need to begin. You need that sense of open-mindedness, of desire, of willing to learn, willing to open yourself up and receive. Okay, the truth is always out there, but we have to be open to receive it. That's a feminine quality. It's absolutely essential and central to the tradition of Kabbalah, which we're going to talk about momentarily, which means reception. So, alchemists also referred to an all-important agent which is necessary for the transmutation of, quote, base metals into, quote, gold, or in other words, base modes of consciousness into higher forms of consciousness. This agent has been referred to as the elixir of life, the philosophical powder, and the quintessence. But by far, the most well-known name for this agent of transformation was the philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone represented man himself at the beginning of the process of self-mastery. It also represented the universal spark, the divine spark or divine essence, which is present in everything that has been created, and thus also in the alchemist himself. The great work of alchemical transmutation is accomplished in 3 phases, which I'm going to cover briefly here. These 3 phases of transformation in alchemy are all explained allegorically. The first phase was called nigredo. Nigredo means blackening in Latin. This is a state of putrefaction, of breaking something down, corruption, dissolution, individuation, descent into matter, descent into the undifferentiated and into chaos. It represents the soul's descent into the material plane and the suffering experienced in the physical world. Alchemists often represented the soul at this stage as the element of salt, because salt is crystallized, it's hardened, it's fixed, just like an ego that is resistant to change. And I would suggest this is the state the world is in. We are in the state of nigredo, of blackening, of corruption, of putrefaction. And believe me, the vast majority of the people on this world are the salt. And I don't mean salt of the earth in the good way. They're crystallized, they're hardened, they're resistant to change, and they need to be dissolved and broken down mentally, emotionally, spiritually. The second phase of alchemical transformation is albedo, which means whitening. Albedo represents the process of spiritual purification, the burning out of impurities from the salt or hardened ego. The salt in this step is reduced into quicksilver or mercury, which represents fluidity, and the process of rapid mental, emotional, and spiritual change, and the strengthening of the sacred feminine essence, leading to the engagement of the imagination. The only substance, the only essence from which the elixir of life or the awakened or enlightened mind can then be made. This is why the dark occult want to stamp out the human imagination, because they don't want the process of transformation to happen in our species. You know, this step is about when people start to learn the truth and are accepting of it. They have the mindset of openness and reception. Again, the date today is no accident. Highly synchromistic. 10-4. Reception. I got it. I get it. I've heard it. 10-4. Okay? No accident. No such thing. As soon as Art suggested the date, I said, I love it. It's all about reception, you know? So this step is the awakening process, the awakening step. It's when we recognize the world isn't what we thought it was, and we start developing a desire for more than the base things in life. We start developing a desire to know the truth, the desire to reach higher realms of consciousness, the desire to better ourselves and be better than we were the day before. When we're going to start working upon ourselves by taking in the truth and letting go of beliefs and letting go of impurities in our thought processes and bringing our consciousness into alignment with truth and with morality. That's this step of the process. Whitening, purification, the burning out of impurities. It's a beautiful allegory if it's properly understood. The third and final phase of the alchemical, quote, great work is rubedo. Rubedo means reddening, the transmutation into gold or sulfur, alchemical substances, gold or sulfur. And they represented purified and enlightened consciousness. The elemental fire of the philosopher's stone. Again, that's why it was symbolized by a red elixir. Often the philosopher's stone was depicted as a red stone itself. And that represented the unification of man, which was the limited being, with the divine will, often represented by a red color as well, the unlimited. So it's a paradox in terms. It's the microcosm joining with the macrocosm. It's man as the limited being in the physical domain having a spiritual learning experience here in the physical world coming into union with the divine spark or essence, the unlimited force inherent in nature. That's alchemy in a nutshell. Very simple explanation of the allegorical tradition. Again, this is rudimentary work meant to whet the appetite of the student. Let's briefly look at the Hermetic tradition. A quote, which is an inscription from the ruins at the Delphic Oracle in Greece. Heed these words, ye who wish to probe the depths of nature. If you do not find within yourself that which you seek, neither will you find it outside of yourself. If you ignore the wonders of your own house, how do you expect to find other wonders? In you is hidden the treasure of treasures. Know thyself, and you will know the universe and the gods. Again, it's an understanding that if you really deeply explore either of the realms of the occult, the microcosmic realm or the macrocosmic realm, they are reflections of each other. This is the correspondence principle at work. To know the self is to know the universe. To know the universe is to know the self. It's to understand the dynamic interplay between free will and natural law, a theme that comes up over and over and over again in occult traditions and teachings. And again, the Hermetic tradition was also a growing out of, a continuation of the Comitian tradition that was practiced in, again, later Egypt and then was passed into Greece. I'm going to read some Hermetic philosophy from a book known as the Kybalion. I know a lot of people debate that pronunciation and like to call it the Kabbalion, but I see that as far too modern Anglicized, and I like to pronounce it how it probably would have been pronounced in the ancient Greek language, in which there was no short Y sounds. It would have been a long I sound, Kybalion, and every syllable would have been pronounced. Again, people can debate that. It's kind of a splitting of hairs, but I prefer what would have been closer to the ancient pronunciation. The Kybalion states, there is no portion of the occult teachings possessed by the world which have been so closely guarded as the fragments of the Hermetic teachings which have come down to us over the tens of centuries which have elapsed since the lifetime of its great founder, Hermes Trismegistus, the quote, scribe of the gods, again, Thoth in the Egyptian tradition, Hermes in the Greek tradition, Hermetic tradition, he was known as Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great one. Trismegistus means great 3 times over, or thrice great. He was great in his thoughts, in his emotions, and in his actions. His aspects of his consciousness were unified. Some people look at, he was the original alchemist in the Comitian tradition, the creator god Ptah. Okay? So, Hermes Trismegistus, the quote, scribe of the gods, who dwelt in old Egypt in the days when the present race of men was in its infancy. And I would agree with that. Hermes was and is the great central sun of occultism, whose rays have served to illumine the countless teachings which have been promulgated since his time. All the fundamental and basic teachings embedded in the esoteric teachings of every race may be traced back to Hermes Trismegistus. Even the most ancient teachings of India, he's referring to the Vedas here, undoubtedly have their roots in the ancient Hermetic teachings. So the person who wrote the Kybalion, or the group of people who wrote the Kybalion, are stating that it is their belief that the Hermetic teachings are the roots of modern occultism. I tend to look at ancient Comitian philosophy as being even older than even the Hermetic tradition, and perhaps shamanism being even more than that. More from the Kybalion. The life work of Hermes seems to have been in the direction of planting the great seed truth which has grown and blossomed in so many strange forms, rather than to establish a school of philosophy which would dominate the world's thought. Again, he's trying to make it clear that the Hermetic tradition was a collection of teachings, a body of knowledge, not one specific dogmatic religion or one set of teaching. But nevertheless, the original truths taught by Hermes have been kept intact in their original purity by a few men in each age who, refusing great numbers of half-developed students and followers, followed the Hermetic custom and reserved their truth for the few who were ready to comprehend and master it. They're describing occultism. They hid the truth from those who did not really want it or they knew would not use it wisely. In other words, their motto or their dictate was no pearls before swine. Okay? I see it as kind of an elitist ideology, and I'll tell you why I don't necessarily agree with it. They're going to talk about the people who didn't agree with this approach. In the modern day, I'm certainly one of them. Now, perhaps in those times things would have been different, but I'll tell you what, with the world on the brink of collapse and chaos the way it is now, the likes of which humanity may never have seen, the likes of the kind of chaos we're likely to see in our lifetimes possibly. I don't even think some of the old Hermetic teachers would have advocated secrecy in today's world. They would have advocated taking this knowledge and propagating it as widely and as freely as possible. At least I hope so. I hope they would have taken that position. But that's the position I take anyway. They followed the Hermetic custom and reserved their truth for the few who were ready to comprehend and master it. From lip to ear, the truth has been handed down among the few. There have always been a few initiates in each generation in the various lands of the earth who kept alive the sacred flame of the Hermetic teachings, and such have always been willing to use their lamps to relight the lesser lamps of the outside world, when the light of truth grew dim and became clouded by reason of neglect, and when the wicks became clogged with foreign matter. There were always a few to tend faithfully to the altar of truth, upon which was kept alight the perpetual lamp of wisdom. These men have never sought popular approval, nor numbers of followers. They are indifferent to these things, for they know how few there are in each generation who are ready for the truth or who would recognize it if it were presented to them. Now, I don't make any bones about that. Yeah, there's few people who are very prepared and ready to receive truth, and if it's presented to them, they're going to accept it readily. Few people are already prepared through knowledge and open-mindedness and humbleness enough to simply open up their mind and heart and receive truth. Not in this world. I know that's not how it happened for me. I suffered beating the red-hot sword with the iron hammer in a forge of suffering. That's what got me to finally wake up and break my ego down. Hardcore fire of purification did it for me. But I speak this information to try to explain to people you don't have to go through that process. If you will listen to wisdom and truth, then you don't have to go through that deep level of suffering. But most people seem to want it. To go back to this quote, these teachers reserved the, quote, strong meat for men, while others furnished the, quote, milk for babes. They reserve their pearls of wisdom for the few elect who recognize their value and who wear them in their crowns instead of casting them before the materialistic, vulgar swine who would trample those teachings in the mud and mix them with their disgusting mental food. But still these men have never forgotten or overlooked the original teachings of Hermes regarding the passing on of the words of truth to those ready to receive it. Their customary attitude has always been strictly in accordance with the other Hermetic aphorism, quote, the lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. Now, people could say, well, I have stated in the past, I'm putting out my work for the people who are ready to become teachers themselves. and they are ready to receive it. I've made no bones about the fact I can't make anybody take this information if they don't want to hear it, or if they're not interested. If that desire, that I symbolically represent by this orange color throughout this presentation, that sacred desire force that operates to take the person up out of the base instincts and just living, for this see the world, what you see is what you get type thing, never penetrating the surface, never looking any deeper, never going into the deeper realms of the human subconscious and the human mind, then I can't make them look at that. There's no way to make somebody do that work, because that's internal work that has to be done upon themselves. I can only act as an assistant to that process of transformation through providing some information and some support. But I don't agree with this elitist attitude of don't put the information out there because these people don't want to hear it, which seems to be the spirit in which this is said. Okay, I take the approach again of egalitarian aspect or egalitarian mentality on two fronts. One, when it comes to all of our natural rights, we are equal under that law, under that natural law. And two, I believe in egalitarianism when it comes to information being presented, information which we need, vital information which we need to make truly informed decisions in life. That information should be provided freely and openly. So I don't agree with this hermetist's attitude of don't cast pearls before swine. I'm going to speak information to everybody. Who's ready to take it will take it, and that will be their karmic choice and consequence. And who ignores it will do so at their own peril. There are those who have criticized this attitude of the Hermetists and who have claimed that they did not manifest the proper spirit in their policy of seclusion and reticence, and I would be one of those, and still am. Regardless of the statement that comes after it, I still say I criticize that attitude and spirit. But a moment's glance back over the pages of history will show the wisdom of the, quote, masters who knew the folly of attempting to teach the world that which it was neither ready or willing to receive. I don't think we have a choice now, folks. We're on the precipice of ruin, and it needs to be taught now regardless of who wants to hear it or receive it. At least all we can do is put it out there. Again, it's someone else's karma, it's humanity's karma, whether they will receive it or not. The Hermetists have never sought to be martyrs and have instead sat silently aside with a pitying smile on their closed lips while the, quote, heathen raged noisily about them in their customary amusement of putting to death and torture the honest but misguided enthusiast who imagined that they could force upon a race of barbarians the truth capable of being understood only by the elect who had advanced along the path. Okay, I think you can hear the kind of elitist attitude or spirit embedded in this, but I do also understand what they're saying. At certain times in history, you would have been tortured for presenting some of these truths about the reality of our world. And so then some Hermeticists took this approach of just keep your mouth closed and let the people who don't want to receive this suffer. Again, I personally do criticize that attitude, particularly in the world today. Maybe if more people would have stepped up, taught this to more people, and they would have gained the courage to teach it to a wider audience, we wouldn't have gone down the path we did as a species, namely into slavery. Another big aspect of the Hermetic principles, again taught in this great little book, the Kybalion, which I highly recommend everybody to read, about the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt and Greece. What time do we have? How much time do we have? About 7 minutes? Okay, thank you. The Hermeticists taught 7 basic overarching operating principles in nature. The principle of mentalism, which essentially, I've already covered that. It states anything that is going to be manifested in reality must first exist in the realm of mind. As a matter of fact, all of nature is ultimately a mental construct at the deepest level, and matter is a construct for experience and growth in consciousness. As such, is solidity, is matter truly physically real? It is a quantum fluctuation in the vacuum. It's a holographic quantum experience that is necessary for growth and development of consciousness. So, That doesn't mean I go into the full right brain imbalance mode that many New Agers and religionists take, that this is all an inferior realm matter is, and we shouldn't try to act and create any real world change here. No, that's not a state of balance, that's right brain imbalance. Balance means you have your head in the cosmos, meaning you are at a higher level of consciousness in how you're operating, and you understand that matter may be a constructural thing to provide learning for the soul, but you have your feet firmly planted on the ground, anchored in the real world, taking real world action to better yourself and to help better others. So that's the principle of mentalism. Correspondence is the aphorism of as above, so below, or as within, so without. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm, and the macrocosm reflects the microcosm. That which we do at an individual scale will become our aggregate quality of behavior at a larger scale and will become our macroscopic experience. That's the law of correspondence. The law of vibration, again, at a very low undifferentiated level, everything is simply a fluctuation or a vibration, vibratory energy existing in the vacuum, and nothing is truly at rest. Everything ultimately is in a state of vibration. There is no such thing as the cessation of motion or the cessation of vibration or sound. The principle of polarity, everything has poles to it, everything has opposites, everything has a kind of a spectrum of extremes, a spectrum of polarities that result in two opposite extremes, ultimately operating through the same thing, through the same medium, but seeming to have different extremes in their polarities. The principle of rhythm, everything moves in cycles and has a rhythm to it, has an up and down quality, an ebb and flow quality through time. The principle of cause and effect essentially is almost equivalent with natural law principles. That which we cause and put out into effect in the universe is then demonstrated back to us by the universe like a mirror. Okay, so we reap what we sow. That which we put out into the universe, we receive back from the universe. There is no effects that manifest without causal factors that precede them. And finally, the principle of gender, which states that there is a masculine and feminine quality, a blending between those two polarities in everything in nature. These principles operate in everything in the natural world, and they are always operating. As such, they were called the Hermetic principles, and the word hermetic comes down to us in modern English through the word hermetically sealed. It means that it's fixed, it's operating inherently in nature, and nothing we do is going to change those principles at work in nature. All we can do is align our consciousness to them by understanding that they do exist, that they are operating in nature, and then we can learn to live in harmony with them and not create self-inflicted suffering, just like the physical laws of dynamics. They are fixed, they are set in stone. While you are on Earth, you are operating in a 1G gravitational field. If you step off of a large building, gravity will have an effect upon the mass of your body and you will go splat. That's a fixed law, and all you can really do is understand it. It doesn't matter if you like it or not, but you can understand it and therefore align your behavior not to do such a stupid thing by walking off a building in a 1G field, okay? So the laws of nature expressed by the Hermetic tradition are set in stone and hermetically sealed. And this tradition does a really good job of explaining the underlying principles of natural law.